Yeah, the thing that bugs me is that nobody talks about the abstinence component, or they don't talk about much in the sex addiction side.
Mm-hmm.
Yet nobody expects them to be abstinent forever. You just can be abstinent or in some way, shape, or form, like the no fapping stuff. You
Yeah.
know, no masturbating.
This idea
Right.
of rebooting and all of this. Yeah. Yeah, it completely misses the boat. And, as we've been talking about 12 steps and kind of the flaws, I guess, in the addiction model in total, I really want to kind of make sure we talk about sex addiction, because the reality is there are people who are struggling with out-of-control sexual behaviors, who are hurting themselves, hurting people around them with their sexual actions. And so I guess I just want to hear a little bit about what you would say to somebody who is dealing with maybe the fallout or the repercussions, the symptomology that they are attributing to sex addiction.
Well, first of all, I would not say that sex doesn't cause problems for people. It does.
Of course.
So let's get that right off the table, right off the bat. People have sexual behaviors they don't know what to do with. They have sexual drives they don't know what to do with. I know, working with adolescent boys who were sexually abused, horrendously sexually abused, when they were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And now I'm working with them. This is 30 years ago when I was in the criminal justice system, working with 13, 14-year-old boys who had incredibly inappropriate acting out sexual behavior. Well, I have to understand that came from a deep, serious abuse that came in their lives. And now, of course, we have to work with them, but that is not sex addiction. That comes directly from the abuse they experienced. And we have to realize, I think, that abuse is oftentimes a big driver of what the religion calls sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about this. You got say you got a 45-year-old man who's acting out sexually, and he was abused as an altar boy by a priest when he was 10, 11, and 12 years old. And he reports it to his parents, and his parents believe the priest. And so now the kid not only has been abused by his priest, but they've been betrayed by the parents. This leads to now trauma around, I can't trust anybody in my life. And you got a 14-year-old boy now who's got normal drives, and his whole biological structure that should be maturing at that time has been disrupted. So is it any surprise that at 40 or 45 he's acting out? And yet the church will then come back and say, well, you're a sex addict.
Mm-hmm.
Whole groups of people will say you're a sex addict because you expose yourself, or because you masturbate too much, or because you're not showing you're gay, or whatever. And it basically leads back to the original abuse. So I'm real cautious about even talking about sex addiction. I want to talk about what's manifesting, what behavior is causing the problem, and is it really a problem? I've had people come to me saying, I'm masturbating 8 times a day. Well, okay, is that getting in the way of your business, your work, your family? If it is, we'll talk about that. But masturbation 8 times a day is not a big deal. I've met people that masturbate more than that, and they function just fine. So,
well, and one of the most common, I guess, symptoms, for people who are self-describing as sex addicts is erectile dysfunction, or at least their perception of erectile dysfunction. And something I feel like I'm constantly educating people on is the fact that, if you're ejaculating 8, 9, 10 times a day, your erectus is functioning. If you're not having the type of partnered sex that you're wanting, if you're not having like penis and vagina intercourse because you're having trouble getting hard, yeah, maybe it is because you're masturbating too much, but this notion that because you're addicted to porn, because you're addicted to sex, that you have no ability to have the type of sex that you would prefer, is just really missing the boat. And more, research shows pretty clearly that it's very quick to recover. You know, if you aren't able to get the type of erection that you're looking for and the type of sex that you're wanting to have, it doesn't take the withdrawal symptoms and all of the other components of addiction that we see to get to the point where you're actually able to have those types of interactions, to have that type of erection or that type of experience.
Yeah. And I see that. Well, I've had almost exactly the same experience you're talking about with people saying I've got ED when in fact, no, you got great erections. You just don't have one when you're with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And you really need to help people understand that, like you've said, is it a relationship issue? And also I find that people have choice. People make choices every day. I'm going through my day and I have a choice to buy 3 ice cream cones and 7 candy bars, or I can eat a healthy meal. So that's a choice I make. And we do the same thing with sex in many ways. I have the choice to, I think one thing is becoming aware of what your body wants and what it's capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to teach people. And if somebody says,
understanding that appetite instead of just like leaning into the desire for ice cream.
Exactly. So I'm gonna say I'm capable of masturbating 5 times a day. So what do I want in my life though? Do I want to masturbate 5 times a day and then not have any energy left for my partner? And this is equal for men, women, and men, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll say, okay, I understand what my body's capable of and know what my desires and my capacities are. How do I want to allocate my energy? Because if I want to stay in a relationship, I want to allocate a significant amount of my sexual energy to that relationship.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at this. There's other ways, of course. So I will masturbate 2 times a day, and then I'll save my energy for my partner in the night or the morning or whenever we want to have sex, if that's what we want to do. And I think it's a rational approach, but it's a mindful approach too.
Mm-hmm.
Start being mindful of, instead of just saying, oh, I can get on the internet and watch some porn and jack off again. Instead of that, I say, but I'd like to save something for my partner tonight. And that kind of mental approach to sexuality takes the guilt out of it. Because here's one of my pet peeves. I've got a lot of these, don't I? I have a right to have a sexual relationship with myself, independent of my partner. That's just basic human sexuality. The first partner I ever had in my life was me. And I want to maintain that partnership. I love my body. I love feeling my body. I love the feeling of my own sexuality. But I also want to have a relationship with somebody else. That's very important to me too. So I allocate so much energy for me. I allocate so much energy for my partner. And of course, my partner has something to say about that, because if my partner says, I'd like more or I'd like less, then that, I can manage that. I
allocate resources, manage those resources.
I know it sounds kind of cold.
Well, sure, but it feels to me like one of the insidious aspects of this addiction model is the response that I often hear of, I can't. I can't manage these things. I want to save some of my sexual energy. If I get 6 orgasms a day or 2 orgasms a day or however many, I want to save some of them for my partner. But I just can't help myself. It's so easy to open up porn on my phone when I get up in the morning, or open up my laptop when I'm on my lunch break, or whatever else it is. That's something that I hear over and over and over again. And that is what I think people are seeing and referring to as addiction. I'm addicted. I can't not do this. How do you respond to that? Well,
I think that therein lies an opportunity to get some good counseling. And I think can learn mindfulness techniques that will help them make decisions consciously. What I hear you saying, and what I've heard the same thing from people, is I'm unconscious. I give in to my immediate desire.
Yeah, that lower power, that baser power that takes over.
Right. And of course, the Christians would say, well, something like that's the devil pushing you in that direction, or something stupid like that. But with or without a devil, you still can be unaware and out of control of your own desires, just like, because it's not much different. I can go up in the refrigerator right now and eat a pint of ice cream. But I'm mindful enough to realize that's not good for my body. It's not good for other things in my life I want to do. I'd rather not get diabetes. So I make a mindful decision to not do that now, but to have ice cream this evening while I'm watching TV. And I only make, 2 scoops full, perhaps. We've learned how to do that with food. Food is an appetite. Sex is an appetite. And I think we can learn how to do it with sex. And you may need counseling. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it's not the devil doing it. And it's not because you're a sinful person at all. Well, is that where you were thinking, or what you were thinking? Or?
To me, this is really the crux of this entire conversation. Everything that we've discussed here really, to me, comes down to this question of what does that word addiction mean? Even in our production meetings before this episode, there was conversation about how, you can be addicted to anything if you do it enough or if you become too drawn to it. And there are people who would say, I'm addicted to ice cream, I'm addicted to food, I don't have the ability to control myself, and these things. And I hear that, and I recognize that that pain, that human suffering, that need for maybe counseling or some other support, and I want to be a part of that solution. But to me, it really comes down to the important distinction of what the word addiction means and why we're misusing it when we're applying it to ice cream, pornography, Pokemon, Instagram, whatever the hell it is, when people throw that word around, because it does have an important clinical meaning. I guess I'd love to just hear you speak to what differentiates a quote, true addiction. The APA recognizes a number of different drugs, alcohol, these different things as being addictive. So what is it that makes heroin different from, masturbation? Other than the fact that it's heroin. I mean, it's kind of a dumb question, but it's one I know a lot of people are either asking or misunderstanding.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, both are creating opportunities for opiates in our brain to be creative, of course. And one is an external source of chemical stimulation. The other is an internal source. Mm-hmm. I think the two are qualitatively different in several different ways. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in addictions, but I will say this: it is really, even the APA acknowledges it's very difficult to identify what an addiction really is.
Sure.
The APA has been backing off for years of calling things addictions. I mean, less and less they're calling them addictions, and the reason is it's so hard to clinically define what that addiction is. In order to be clinical about it and scientific, you have to have criteria that are measurable and observable. And it's hard to say that somebody's an addict if it's not causing any problems in their life and they're enjoying it. And there are, in fact, people that are taking some pretty serious drugs and getting themselves in all sorts of trouble. And is it without the drugs, would that person still have gotten themselves in trouble somewhere? And the interesting thing is, I don't think a drug in one culture gets people in trouble. A drug in another culture doesn't.
Sure.
Sometimes it's the cultural influences that are so insidious, and how the culture treats the use of the drug. Now, we see cultures that were devastated by drugs, like that resulted in the heroin wars in China in the 1890s. I mean, it devastated an entire society. So we know a drug can do that. So I'm not denying that drugs have that. But let's then go to sexuality. My masturbation does not cause the kind of chemical cascade in your brain that a drug does, like heroin. So number one, it's natural. Number two, it has positive effects, like you can relax more. I've had people say after I've had sex or I've had masturbation, I can concentrate more, those kinds of things. So there's positive endorphins that come from it that allow you to be what you want to be. The problem is when a person feels guilty after they masturbated, or they feel guilty after they had sex with their partner or had sex with somebody they're not married to, I mean, that guilt comes back and creates stress hormones. So you've actually created another kind of drug, if you will, in your body as a result of the shame and guilt that we were taught. And I'm not saying I can answer your question definitively. I'll just say that it's really complicated when you throw in guilt and shame. And when I feel guilt and shame about something, I want to feel better.
Sure.
I feel bad. So what do? I masturbate again.
Yeah.
Or I have sex again. Or I go find another sex partner. Well, in some ways, you're self-medicating. But what are you self-medicating yourself for? For guilt and shame. If you get rid of the guilt and shame, what happens? I've had many, many people say, I thought I was a porn addict until I became an atheist. And now I don't masturbate as much. I don't use as much porn. I still masturbate and I still use porn, but not nearly as much. Well, why did that decrease? And almost all the time they say, I don't feel guilty about it anymore. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel that shame and guilt drive that's there.
Well, it's like you said about allocating resources. If, masturbation is great. It feels great. We encourage people to do it pretty well every episode of this show. But if we're using it to treat depression, using it to treat anxiety, I'll go ahead and say that there's nothing wrong with that, so long as we recognize that it is a limited tool with limited efficacy. And if you're using your penis, your vulva, whatever, to treat your depression, it's only going to carry you so far. And if you're reliant on it and you're doing it 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day or more, only to try and treat that depression, you've got your finger in the dike and you're not going to really stop the flow of depression, and you're not going to be able to really solve the problem.
I like that. You got your finger in the dike.
I didn't mean for it to be a double entendre. I'll let the audience make whatever assumptions they want to. I'll go ahead and throw that out there.